Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Allen, and I'm going to be giving a brief demonstration on how to set up a Raspberry Pi computer for retro video game emulation. Now, how many people in here grew up playing video games? Most of the hands in the room, okay. How many of you tried to, but maybe couldn't find it in stock, get the NES Classic that Nintendo released last year? See a couple of hands going up. I tried to get it. I couldn't find it anywhere except eBay, and it was like triple the price, so that kind of defeated the purpose. I might as well just buy a used Nintendo and be happy with it. The neat thing about Raspberry Pi computers are they're so versatile. So why do we Pi? Raspberry Pi computers are extremely versatile. They're small, they have low power consumption, but they are remarkably capable little devices. And so a lot of people get into tinkering with Raspberry Pi for the sake of maybe a cool project they saw on Gizmodo or Lifehacker, or something their friend said, hey, check this out, check out this blog post I found. And they get to tinkering. They say, wow, it's only $35, $40 worth of parts and a few little widgets and doohickeys that I have around at home. Not a big cost to invest in, and you can do some neat stuff with them. So how did I end up with one? There were a lot of blog posts that my friends were sharing on Facebook. I'm, of course, friends with a lot of other like-minded tech enthusiasts, and a dear friend of mine shared with me a smart mirror where you could take an LCD monitor, put it behind two-way glass, and hang it in your hallway, and have Raspberry Pi drive a little heads-up display on your way out the door. See how the weather is, see what you have on your to-do list for the day. Kind of a cool tinkering project. And my wife will be the first to tell you this, I collect a lot of tech gizmos and gadgets. So for me, you know, it all comes down to I secretly wish I were Tony Stark, and I love to tinker with things. So I ended up with a couple of Raspberry Pis at home that I wasn't doing much with. And what did I do? Well, I forgot that I had a few of them. They got lost because they're so small. They ended up on a shelf, and they sort of just sat there for a while. But also, my wife, like me, loves classic video games. One of our first dates was beating Super Mario 1, 2, and 3 in pretty much one sitting. And yes, we did use the warp whistles to cheat and skip through a few zones in Mario 3. So for me, video gaming's been a very big part of my life. And any way that I can share that joy with others, any way that I can play more games, I like doing that. So when it came time for our wedding, we were talking like, okay, what do all of our friends have in common? And what can we get them as like a thank you for coming all the way from across the world for our wedding kind of gift. And so we realized, you know, we had friends that were city slickers, friends that loved to hike, friends that, you know, would never use some of the regular gifts you get for like a wedding goodie bag. So one of my groomsmen, the same friend that suggested all the tinkering projects that got me to buy a Raspberry Pi in the first place, suggested why don't I look into RetroPi. So RetroPi is a very handy, very tidy, community-maintained package for Raspberry Pi users to install a build of RasPi and Linux that lets you use a standard video game controller like this SNES controller I have here to control the interface. You don't need a keyboard, you don't need a mouse, true plug and play video gaming from a Raspberry Pi. And again, the Raspberry Pi being so capable, and the Pi Zero being kind of a new thing, the novelty of giving a gift the size of a pack of gum in a cool little case that could run off of a cell phone charger, that all you had to do was add a USB controller, this free software, and a couple of games, and you're up and ready to play. So a couple $100 later, buying video game controllers for my groomsmen and some of our other wedding guests, I got to work putting together some Raspberry Pis as RetroPi consoles. So what are we going to do here today, live? And knock on wood, things go well. As I'm sure you all know, tech demonstrations often go with a little hitch or two, so we're going to see how this goes. But setting up a RetroPie is very, very easy. It's, I think, one of the best introductory projects for people looking to tinker with the Raspberry Pi and kind of find a reason for having one sitting on the shelf. So we are going to set up a Raspberry Pi from scratch. I've fast-forwarded on a couple of steps that are more time-consuming in the interest of keeping this moving, but we're going to set it up pretty much from scratch right here in the next 10 minutes. So the goal is we get many more video games than would come with, say, the Nintendo Classic that was released last year. It's a lot cheaper. There's a lot more controller options available if you prefer the old joystick with arcade button pads. There are plenty of options for that over USB as well, for about $15 a controller. So it's kind of a really neat starter project. So what you'll need, you're going to need a Raspberry Pi, of course. I recommend if you're just buying hardware for this project, consider the newer Raspberry Pi 3B because of its computing power. It's a bit more powerful than some of the previous models, and it'll let you emulate and run newer video games from, say, the Nintendo 64 or the PlayStation 1 in that era. Pretty much any Raspberry Pi will run Sega Genesis games, Nintendo Entertainment System games, Super Nintendo games, and all of the arcade classics. So for a very low cost investment, you can get a $5 Raspberry Pi Zero, and I do recommend springing for the one that has Wi-Fi, and I'll explain why a little later, but there are some handy features if you have Wi-Fi on the device. So next you'll need a power supply, of course. You have to power it. You're going to need a USB game controller. I recommend this model here. It's usually about $12 on Amazon. The presentation will be online later with some helpful links if you want to just kind of put a little shopping list together from this. But it's called the Buffalo USB Classic Gaming Controller. And it really feels like an old Super Nintendo controller. And for folks whose childhoods were grounded in playing video games for hours until we had Nintendo Thumb, this kind of controller is really what it's all about, so you're not playing it on a touchscreen device. You're going to need a micro SD card to store your games on, as well as the operating system. And this is again where Raspberry Pi is kind of cool. The space required for classic video games on these devices is minuscule compared to the space you get from even a cheap $5 micro USB card. Literally all of the Nintendo Entertainment System games, all of the games from Sega Genesis, all of the games from Super Nintendo, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance, and Sega 32X. That was a lot, sorry. Literally all of those games is about 3 gigabytes. So even a cheap 8 gigabyte card will get you where you need to be for literally about 1,800 games worth of storage, plus the operating system. So we live in the future. It's a pretty cool time. You're going to need a USB flash stick to move over your video game files. And you're going to need, if you're working with the Raspberry Pi Zero, you're going to need an adapter that takes the larger standard USB plug, like this one, down to the micro USB size. It only has one port available when you're powering it. So that's a consideration there. And you'll need an HDMI cable to hook it up to your TV. And the fun part, you need some games. Now, I have to be honest with you, video game emulation is a little bit of a gray area legally. There's a lot of websites where you can download a zip file of literally every video game for a specific system ever made. I don't recommend going that route. I'm not a lawyer, but you know, the consensus among the lawyers who are also video gamers, I consulted a friend of mine on this, who's an attorney. He said if you have the physical copy of the game, if you bought like Super Mario Brothers at the thrift store for $1, you can have the ROM of it. It's considered an in-kind copy. So consider that before you download thousands of games and get hit with fines. So you'll need a computer, of course, and I see a lot of kids in the room that are pretty excited about putting together their own video game console. Get your parents' help on this one because you can accidentally overwrite some files on your parents' computer if you do this step wrong. So get help from your folks on this. And you'll need the image file for RasPi, which you can get from RasPi's website. And again, the presentation will be online later so that you can download from all of the links that I have in the presentation here. You'll need a specific version for either the Raspberry Pi Zero or the old Raspberry Pi 1 or the multi-core Raspberry Pis, the newer ones, the 2s and the 3s. And it'll give you an error message if you try to use the wrong one on the card, and it's a quick download to fix it. So, step one, we take our micro SD card, and micro SD cards come in a lot of different brands, a lot of different speeds. You're going to want to go with a faster speed card in order to write to and read from the memory very quickly, but it all lives right here on this little chip. So if you have a computer that has an SD card adapter, all you have to do is you put it into the SD card adapter, plug it right into the side of your computer, and use whatever disk utility, and this is for the kids in the room that are probably going to tinker with this one. This is where you get your parents' help. Use your system's disk utility to wipe off the card completely clean before we do the next part. One of the utilities available is actually from the foundation that sets all the standards for SD cards. It's a quick, like 100 kilobyte download, SD card format. And again, for the kids in the room, get your parents' help on this one so you don't accidentally erase their external hard drive or wipe their Windows installation. So, next, what you're going to do once you have a completely cleared off card, you're going to use a utility to burn your disk image. Now, how many of you have never set up a Raspberry Pi computer before? Like, this is your first time doing it? Everyone in here, really? Everyone in here has done that before. That's cool. So, so you're familiar with putting the operating system on your SD card and getting that set. I'll be brief for anyone that's too shy to raise their hand. For me, this was the first time I'd ever done it. When I was putting together about 10 of these RasPi consoles, I used a utility called Apple Pi Baker, which once you have your copy of the software from RasPi, which I've downloaded here, this is the disk image for the Raspberry Pi 3. All you have to do, you pop in the memory card and you just select your disk image file. Now, this runs for a little while, so I fast forwarded on this step, but as the program's running, you get a progress bar and a time estimate. It's usually about 8 to 12 minutes for a small SD card. If everything goes well, you get this happy message here. This is what success looks like. And it will automatically eject the card. You just pull it right out of your computer. So here's where we're going to switch over to the Raspberry Pi now, and I'm going to pop in the card that I prepared with the RasPi image. So I have a Raspberry Pi 3B here that currently has no card in it. You just pop in your card carefully because it's a very tiny and fragile piece of memory. There we go. I can't tell you how many of these I accidentally cracked in half trying to get them to fit the first time I used a Pi Zero. 2 of them. So, okay. Plug in the Pi Zero here. Sorry, the Pi 3. So the first time that you run the RasPi on the system, let's see if it'll come up here. It's going to unpack the operating system, as you see it doing there on the screen. And once it's done unpacking the operating system, and it happens very quickly, especially on the Raspberry Pi 3 and any of the newer generation multi-core Raspberry Pis, it's going to expand to completely fill the drive. So if you have a 64 gig or 128 gigabyte memory card, it's going to expand to fill the full size of the card so you can use all of that extra space for storing all of your games. But again, you don't need very much room. So As that runs there, it restarts itself, and we're going into an interface called Emulation Station. Emulation Station is what your Raspberry Pi is going to boot into anytime you plug it in and turn it on after this point. You can customize the splash screen there, which is kind of fun, and a great way to personalize the device. And we see here that it's detected a gamepad. So, all you have to do is plug in your gamepad. In this case, I have the SNES controller. It's never been hooked up to this RetroPi before, so it's going to ask you to push the buttons, kind of Simon Says style here, so it can map the controls to the buttons on your handset. So I'm going to push a button on here. So it wants me to go up, down, left, right, start, select, A, B, X, Y, left shoulder, right shoulder. Now, the Super Nintendo controller doesn't have as many buttons as your Xbox controller or your PlayStation controller, or even some handheld things like the PlayStation Vita has way more buttons than this controller. So if your controller doesn't have what RetroPi is asking for, you just have to press and hold anything until it skips to the next thing. And this just takes a few button pushes to kind of get through the left analog stick, the right analog stick. And it takes only about 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Last two, last one. Okay, we're ready to use it. So hit A to say OK, and welcome to your home screen. So the really neat thing about this project is it's truly plug and play. Once you've done this step here, once you've copied over to the SD card the RetroPi software, it really is as easy as just starting it up, programming your controller, and adding some games. So we're not 100% of the way there yet. So I'm going to switch back to the computer. I'm going to show you the next step on how you get your games installed onto the Raspberry Pi. So this is where you're going to need a USB stick in order to complete the process. You can do this over the network, but the easiest way when you're first starting out is just take the hardware, plug it in, move it over, plug it into the next device. So somebody has graciously loaned me this because I left mine at home. So thank you, whoever's flash drive I'm using. Thanks, Frank. So once you plug in your flash drive, all you need to do is format it so it's nice and clean, and create a folder named RetroPi, all lowercase, one word, and then you're ready to eject it. So I've already done that step. So we're going to tell the operating system to eject that, and you're going to plug it into your Raspberry Pi while it's running. And what it's going to do is it's going to set up a folder structure for each console, for each video game system that this supports. Now, right out of the box, this supports Atari, this supports Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, Sega Saturn, Sega 32X, Super Nintendo, Nintendo 64. I mean, it's a long list. So, it's going to give you a folder for each of those games those systems games to land in. So, you want to make sure that the reading and writing light on your flash drive isn't blinking. Count to 5 once it's done, just to give it a little bit of elbow room there. And then you unplug it from your Raspberry Pi. And the Pi just needs to be on for all of this. You don't even need to see what it's doing because it runs in the background. It doesn't show you anything on the screen. So when we put this back into our computer now, we're going to see a lot more folders there. And that's where the games are going to be filed away in order to transfer them over. So we see here we have configs, BIOS. Leave those alone unless you really know what you're doing. That's how you break this. But the folder we're interested in is ROMs. ROMs is an acronym short for read-only memory. And those are your game files. It's basically a copy of the chip in a Nintendo cartridge or a copy of the chip in a Sega Genesis game. So I've prepared a couple of my favorite games here that I have ROMs of. that we're just going to move over, and I'll show you just how quick it is to move over. So this is Super Mario 1, 2, and 3, and literally you just drag and drop into the NES folder, and we're going to load a couple of my Super Nintendo favorites. This is pretty much all the Super Mario games and Star Fox, Super Mario Kart, Super Mario World. So where's SNES? So you paste those guys in there, and then all you have to do is eject the drive. So we're going to do that now. And I'm going to reconnect the projector to our Raspberry Pi. And this is really where this is a cool project. This used to be kind of a production to get your games onto the device. It used to be kind of a little bit of a pain. So all you have to do, now that we're back in RetroPie, is you plug in your USB flash stick. So set that in there. And you just let that go for a little bit until it's done reading and writing. And it shouldn't take very long. It should take about the same speed it took to go on there. I'm just going to give it a couple seconds so we don't get any incomplete files. Now you'll notice on the home screen right now, it just shows RetroPie. And this is your menu. This is where you can change some settings. You can change your output. You can change your audio settings. So not really something you want to mess with kind of out of the box. It works perfectly. But if you find you're having any problems with, say, audio not coming into your TV, this is where you're going to want to change it under the audio menu. But for now, I'm just going to go back here, cancel out. So that should be done transferring the files. And all you have to do is restart your Raspberry Pi, which you can do from the menu, but in the interest of time, I'm just going to hard boot it here and turn it off and on again. And that's another thing that's nice about this, this particular project. It's pretty resilient. It's hard to break it. So if you ever have a problem with it, just like any tech piece of gear at home, just unplug it, turn it off and on again. And a lot of times, that'll be the biggest fix that you need. So once it loads back up here, we should see additional menus to the left and right of that RetroPie logo. So just take a little bit to boot up here. It takes about 30 seconds for Raspberry Pi 3. The Pi Zero takes about a minute to boot up. Here it goes. And like I said, all of your video game systems are supported right out of the box on this. It just hides them from the menu, so you don't have to scroll through 40 different consoles to get to the couple of NES games or Super Nintendo games. So we see here, we have the Super Nintendo menu, the Nintendo menu, and the RetroPie menu, because we added Super Nintendo games, we added NES games. So all you have to do is, using your controller, click into the sub-menu for whatever system you want. Let's say you want to play like 1989 and pull up Super Mario Brothers. So we're loading Super Mario Brothers here, and we're ready to play. It's that easy to set up, and it's so much fun. It's so much fun because it's something that doesn't take a lot of time. I've done it live in front of you here today. Oops. That's all right. That's all right. So it doesn't take a lot of time to set up. Sorry, Mario. The system is pre-programmed with hotkeys to return to the menu like I just did here. Just by pressing select and start at the same time, it brings you back to the menu. And all the kids in the room know these controls. Hitting B to go back, hitting A to select something. It's the same for this menu system. So it's pretty handy, and I mean, it's really foolproof. I was able to do it, in about 12 minutes since I started plugging it into the device here. So some considerations for it, and some things you'll want to know. I'm going to go back to PowerPoint here. There'll be plenty of time this afternoon to play some Super Mario Brothers and challenge your parents to Tetris downstairs. So we're going to go back into here, skip through some of these. Okay, so we're on step 8, get your game on, it's time to play. So one of the common gotchas, and for the kids in the room, this might be something where you want your parents' help a little bit with, pulling the memory card out and changing just one little line and one little file in order to fix the HDMI audio bug. It's a known bug. They've been saying they're going to fix it for about the past 5 versions now. Not holding my breath, it's going to be fixed in the next 5. But if you do this project at home and you find you're not hearing Mario collecting the coins and jumping over the creatures in the Mushroom Kingdom there, there's really good instructions right here. I'm not going to read it to you right now, but you can refer back to this PowerPoint presentation after today's event. Frank will be hosting that online for us. And this is how I had to do it for all of the Pi Zeros that I've set up with this. The Pi 3s tend to be fine, which is another recommendation for the Pi 3. Now, the coolest feature, I think, as a video gamer, how many of you have gotten to a boss battle in a video game, and then you just got like completely wrecked, and you're right there about to beat the game, and boom, like Ganon comes in and just smacks a Link to the ground, and it's over in one hit. So something I always wished I had when I was playing Nintendo as a kid was the ability to, like, in the middle of playing a game, just kind of save exactly right now everything about the situation of the game before I try and make that crazy long jump across the big pit where Mario could just fall off the screen and go away. Before you're about to face the big bad boss in Mega Man. So this has that built right in, where just by hitting select and the little left bumper, you can load a save game, and select on the right bumper, you can save your game right there while you're playing, which is hugely helpful for video gamers. There's also a lot of customization, which is, I think, the coolest part of anything with a Raspberry Pi, but particularly with RetroPie. You can do a custom splash screen where you can have a picture of your family, you can have your favorite video game character, you can even do an animated video as your splash screen. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I recently got married, and part of what I love about Raspberry Pi and the RetroPie project is I got Cool Uncle of the Year award last year for the Christmas gift I gave my nieces and nephew. So what I did was I built them a RetroPie. I kind of asked them, what are some of your favorite games? Like, what do you wish you could play? We're kind of tinkering with my little RetroPie Zero at Thanksgiving. And that was the top thing they wanted on their Christmas list. They were like, we want 8-bit video games for Christmas. Forget Xbox, forget PlayStation. Give us Super Mario Brothers and Pokemon. So that's exactly what they got. I set them up with a RetroPie preload with all of their favorite games, and games I thought they might enjoy that were my favorites as a kid, like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade game. My nephew loves that. And the neat thing about it was the splash screen on it. I did little caricatures of their family and did a little animation of it here for the splash screen. So as the Raspberry Pi loads, they get to show their friends, like, hey, this is like a custom video game system that our uncle built for us. So if you have any kids in your life and you want to do like a really cool gift for them and share with them classic video games that aren't all the shoot 'em up stuff you see today, like Call of Duty and Battlefield and all those games, this is a great way to get kids started on classic video games. Or for the big kids in the room like me, this is a great project for just killing a couple hours on the weekend with your wife and, like, you know, betting who's going to be at a level faster, and whoever wins pays for takeout that night. So if you have any questions, my name's Jason. I'm a software developer and general tech enthusiast and nerd. So I'll be downstairs at the RetroPie table this whole afternoon between presentations. If there's anything that I can answer for you, I'm happy to. And if you have any blank SD cards with you, happy to set you up with a RetroPie image before you leave here today. Thank you very much for the time.